Happy Friday, community. I hope you're ready for the 10th of our class trio reveals. Some may say the last if you're not counting the crackers or whatever else. So how are you all today? Let me know you can hear me. You can hear me. All right. Okay, well, let's just jump right into it. Here's MJ.
So, yeah, number 10. Not the last class trio reveal we're going to do, but certainly the last for now. So before we get to what I think everyone knows what we're going to be talking about is a little bit of housekeeping as usual. First, there will probably not be a Friday Night Fights tonight. There may not even be an alpha test tonight. However, we are running an IT test right now. If that goes well, we will have an alpha test. The reason there won't be Friday Night Fights and maybe not an alpha test, we've been building and breaking things, and good things are happening. But I may want to wait a week until some of this stuff really is smoother than it is. And let me give you some details. So first, today Rob added 3,000, okay? Let's look at that number. 3,000 buildings to the current map. Those buildings are over 50 million blocks. 3,000, 50 million. Kind of big numbers. We're in it. You can walk around. You can see it. Frame rate's pretty good. There are some issues, and that's what we're tracking down. But we want to be able to show that to everybody, including our Beta 1 folks. So we're going to hold off until we know that this thing is going to get through alpha and not, explode when even more people come in. The other thing we've been working on is performance of our proxies, our mini servers, and Mark and Andrew have been working on ramping up their performance, and that's also coming along quite nicely. We're hoping that the next Friday Night Fights will be, a bit more energetic with, a whole lot of bots running around all weekend. We want to get to that point. It's time. As we get closer, obviously, to the end of the year and closer to beta, we really want to be stressing the engine even more. And by having a bunch of you folks in and hundreds or hopefully thousands of bots all running around with really good performance, it's a great way to do that. So we're definitely going to hold off this week. We've made other improvements that I'll talk about in the in the update. But it's been a very good week, and seeing the buildings just 15 minutes before we started this stream, that was kind of cool. So yeah, 3,000 buildings, pyramids, of course.
The Egyptians never had it so good.
Yeah, the Egyptians, right? Yeah, we're kind of making Egypt look like a bunch of slackers. Thanks, Rob, for that. So that's that, I think, on major housekeeping, at least for now. At the end of the stream, by the way, I'm going to talk a little bit about crafting, because we are going to have a crafting reveal in 2 weeks. Next week we may have a survey reveal, or not really a reveal, just a survey Q&A. But crafting 2 weeks from now. Missing anything?
I don't think so.
Okay, so let's get to the reveal. This week, I think it is really fitting that the final class the final class trio of this set of reveals, because there will be other reveals down the road, is of course the stealth. What do we want to call them? If we call them assassins, people kind of think, ooh, stabby, stabby, stun lock. Hunters, killers.
I think we just typed stealthers on the website.
I think we'll just call them stealthers.
I think
yeah,
we did.
So stealthers. So let's go to stealthers and to that lovely music.
Okay, so again, if you're going to the website at CamelotUnchained.com, you can find in the left-hand corner at the top drop-down menu, there's a class tab there, so click on that. Here is the letter silhouette, which was I this particular time. Here is the trio without names, and here they are with names. So now we're going to do our usual, give you a chance to read up on this while we play the bossa nova and amuse ourselves here. So here we go.
Yeah, we should come up with some other designation.
Okay, you're not seeing the site up yet? You're seeing it still hidden. Okay, well, we're gonna have a little more bossa nova then while we figure out how to fix that. So hang on one second. Direct link works, but nothing else. I know! You want to read more about the red cap. It does sound like the most amazing thing ever. Thanks, Vlad. Still hidden. Well, this is the biggest stealth trick ever, isn't it? We just decided.
Hey, go find it.
You have to search.
You have to search. It might just jump right out. You don't know. Okay, so hit refresh. Apparently, it's up now.
It came
Okay.
up
For a half second, it wasn't up.
Oh, there it is. Okay, read.
Okay. Now you can refresh it.
Okay, we hear some people are not seeing it yet, so we're still looking to see what's going on, alright?
I assume it's a caching issue.
Yeah. Some of you say it, you can see it, and others can't see it. We just went through and picked our targets. That's what happened.
That's the end of the.
Okay, well the song's over, so
Hey,
hope you had time to read.
let's have some more.
Okay, hopefully you had a chance to read that. Sorry about the confusion there at the beginning, making sure that was revealed. Okay.
Okay, so before we go into these, let's just a couple of reminders. Even though this is the 10th reveal, again, it is not the final trio reveal will have other classes. So when some folks, I am sure in chat or on the forums, are going, oh my god, you didn't talk about this, you didn't talk about this, that means there won't be any of this in the game. No, it doesn't mean that. One of the things we've been really clear about, and we absolutely are going to continue to be clear about this is only some of the abilities, not only for this trio, but for the other trios as well. So for those of you who are worried, will there be, this means there'll be no crowd control in the game, or there'll be no whatever else you may think should be in the game that isn't, no, don't worry about it. Third thing, look at these classes and remember, especially when it comes to the names, not final. These are not one of the first three classes, first three trios. So, like we've said for the other trios, just look at it. Tell us if you like the direction. Tell us if you like some of the ideas we have, whether it's for the components, whether it's for the death curse. But remember, all of this is subject to the beta test that will be starting next year. Okay? That being said, let's talk about stealthers. And the first class we'll talk about is, of course, the Arthurians and the Veil Stalkers.
Right. Well, might be Veil Stalker. Did it say Veil Stalker? Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
One of these days we'll get our names and decide what these actually are.
Exactly.
But yeah, so we've talked about stealth for
Ever.
It's been going on for a really long time. Finally, we're getting to actually talk about what these classes really do. And what they do is pretty much what we've always sort of talked about, of like, how do we make it work, of having these very high damage classes, these classes that are stealth that you can't see, that suddenly surprise and attack you, and how will that be integrated into the game? And so a lot of these mechanics, as you can see, have to do with charging up resources, having a limited amount that you can expend on performing certain abilities, having certain bonuses, certain abilities that are good for initiating fights, starting fights, getting that first attack in, but you also have to do it from being in stealth, which means that you can be detected. We have our detection stat, which is tied to hearing in this case. So if you're moving around, if you're wearing armor that makes a lot of noise, there will be ways that people can hear you and can prevent that, or can enable a block or a blade turn or something that will negate that big first attack that gets them out of that already starting deficit situation, which is how stealthers really like to start off their engagements. So there are some difficulties to this. Specifically as far as the Veil Stalker is concerned. You have the Arcane Charge, which is charged up while you're in the Veil. So you want to start off being in the Veil, or you want to start off and then immediately go into the Veil, build up your charge, and then come out again in order to have that extra resource that'll give you some extra things in your abilities. Their focus is very highly on disruption. This is not the same thing as stun or full hard lock crowd control, but it is a way to stop your opponents from using their abilities, because you can have very strong interrupts, and interrupts in our game work against everything. So it's not just only when you're casting spells, any damage interrupts you automatically. It's your abilities have an amount of disruption health to them, melee abilities, ranged abilities, magic abilities, and so if you have high disruption damage, you can interrupt basically anything that anybody is trying to do. That's not to say that everything has the same amount. There will be some abilities that are hard to disrupt, some abilities that are easier to disrupt. Magic abilities specifically are typically easier to disrupt than physical abilities. And so their focus for these classes tends to go more towards the magic-based classes, the ranged-based classes, and specifically ranged-based classes are at a disadvantage against melee anyway, and so since these are melee ranged classes, if you're trying to do abilities that are primarily tuned and balanced for engaging at long ranges, having somebody up in your face is kind of bad for you. So this is a good class to 1v1 against those characters, not only in the context of just a pure solo engagement where you're running around all by yourself, but also in the context of a group where you are sneaking around into the back line and taking out one of these key damage dealers that is a major part of an enemy group.
And I think what Ben said about the difference between our game, especially Disruption, and most other games that have featured stealth and have used any kind of crowd control, is that it doesn't take the other player out of the action. Does it prevent their current action? Absolutely. Which is really important, which can be really useful, but doesn't have that, okay, now I can't do anything, I'm just stuck here while this guy stabs me in the face.
Right, and it doesn't prevent you from moving.
Exactly.
It doesn't prevent you from having another ability used on you. It doesn't prevent everyone from doing anything. It's only focused on this one specific target. Being ganged up on is going to be real bad, I think, for these guys, because they really want to focus down one thing at a time, and they're not useful in the same way as, say, the heavy fighters are, who are good at fighting outnumbered and good at just passively soaking up all of that damage. These guys are not quite that tanky. They're not very weak as far as their defenses are concerned, because they are fairly good duelists, but they're not heavy fighters. I think
Exactly.
that's an important differentiation.
Exactly. So we think that this was a great way to get the Stealther class started, and now we'll go to one of my personal favorites. Okay, I've certainly been accused of having a little bit of favoritism to the TDD, and it's really not true. I must admit that I've had a lot of fun creating some of the initial, visions for these classes, and for the TDD classes especially. And man, this and the Dullahan are two of my absolute favorites. I mean, the Red Cap, not a huge part of, Irish mythology, but it's there. And yeah, I kind of took this a little bit, to the bloody, I think. Like, really bloody. Like, covering themselves in blood and souls of their victims. I think that counts as pretty dark.
This is the most vampiric class that we have, I think.
It's true. I actually didn't look at it that way, but that's, certainly an argument you can make. But they are, of course, a perfect, I think, stealth class.
Yeah.
I think they were a really good fit or the lore was a very good fit for where, we want to go with these guys.
Yeah, the lore certainly fits in very well, especially with the other TD classes, and with the game in general being kind of a fantasy horror game, just overall, including the depths and other things. So this is something that probably shouldn't come as too much of a surprise, even though you may not have heard of what a Red Cap even is. It's something you can look up, because this is a lore-based character. It's not just something that we're entirely making up, as we sometimes do.
And love to do.
But in this case, this is a highly blood-based character. They sort of have an inherent blood deficiency that they have to overcome by going into the Veil and by stealing blood from other characters. And so that sort of plays into a pattern where they start off by being in stealth, having their blood built up, coming out of stealth, and then having this clock that's kind of counting against them as their blood is being diminished over time, that they need to keep fed by stealing the blood of other characters by performing some of their attacks. It does have a sort of difficulty that they're not very good against things that don't have blood, because they can't replenish themselves in that way. And this isn't to say, in case anyone was wondering, that there are any player races that don't have blood, because blood is a resource for our game. Obviously, characters like golems and gargoyles and things like that don't seem very fleshy and squishy still have something that's analogous enough to blood that we're saying that that's their blood resource that they will use if they're playing a character that needs it. And so that still counts for the Red Cap being able to get blood from them. But things like spirit pets, things like the Odin stones, things that are, things created by other characters that are in the world, that are targets that will be attackable, any kind of spell-based things, if it's a entity that you have to either destroy or escape from or have some sort of attack against, it doesn't have blood, then that won't help feed into this resource. So that's one of their sort of weaknesses and things that they will have to watch out for, is if they get heavily engaged against, say, one of our spirit mage classes that's throwing spirits at them that don't have blood, they're going to have a hard time fighting back against those spirits because they're not replenishing themselves. In the case that they are fighting things that do have blood, being able to reduce blood is also a very important strategy. And in this case, this is not a heavily damage-focused character as far as it is a very heavy blood-based character. So if you can drain the blood from your target, if you can reduce their blood down to 0, they die. And since casters are inherently using their blood to cast their spells, they're already taking it up by using their abilities, and if you push them further by taking their blood away from them using abilities on them, that's just going to make them die even faster. And so this is a very different way of going about killing targets. It's not necessarily about inflicting wounds, even though that will be a thing that they can do because they have to just perform combat in general, and dealing damage causes that to happen. But because they have this focus on blood, that is a way that they can go about actually killing off targets much more effectively than I think pretty much any other class in our current list, as far as actually focusing on blood as a way to kill characters off.
Yeah, so again, another different way to look at stealthers, but still keeping their main focus what it should be. Going into the back lines, killing mages.
Yep.
These guys are going to be really good at it. I mean, that's just the bottom line. They are going to be excellent at going at those kind of targets. So, third and final class of the first 10 are, of course, the Vikings, and they are the Shadow Walkers. And these guys, a little bit different as well. Not quite what you might have expected, but I think it's another pretty good idea.
You sure we weren't going to go with Black Walker?
Well, we could.
Or Dark Walker?
Yeah, I thought that maybe people would be disappointed, if we, didn't go with Black
didn't
Walker.
do that,
yeah. Or Black Shadows.
Black Dark Shadow
Black
Walker.
Dark Shadow Walker.
Yeah, so
yeah, Black. So that
we
was
can maybe
actually
improve this a bit here.
Yeah, that we can change the name. You guys can tell us in chat if you really like that one. We'll have James Koo, just change it immediately. We'll make new art, and yeah, I think that'll work. Yeah, of course they're voting. Yes, do it.
We are disappointed.
And actually, in this case especially, the name really does fit what the character, what the character does in the game. It is not, Shadow Walker was not my way of just sneaking, something dark in there. Mm-hmm. It's actually part of their mechanics.
Yeah, and so, as you've seen in some of our other classes, there are characters in the game that care about the day-night cycle, and certainly have benefits based on one state or the other, sometimes penalties that go in the opposite way. But that's not to say that they're completely ineffective and the only time I'm ever going to play this character is at night. In this case, this is a benefit that they get for playing at night, and they will probably want to arrange some of their timings and patterns and around being in the right place at the right time so that they can get off these engagements during the night so that they get these bonuses, but the rest of the time it's not that big of a swing, so it's not something that you're going to have to worry about. I'm a Shadow Walker, it's daytime, therefore I'm not useful, I can't really play the game.
Well, plus I can think of a big place that we're going to be working on that probably doesn't
there
have a lot of sunlight.
There might be some other shadowy places where daytime doesn't even exist, so
exactly.
So that will be useful for them as well, because they are based on their concealment, and concealment is something that you can get from environmental things. You can have that happen from obviously the day-night cycle, but there is a bit more to it than just whether it is a certain time or not. In this case, this character has a sort of deficiency in their inherent melee capabilities. Their physical damage is less than it otherwise would be. This is a way that we shift their emphasis more towards the shadow magic elements and away from the actual physical damage, which you might think, well, that's weird because this is an assassin sort of character with a dagger. He really needs to be doing high damage. But the way that he does that is by applying debuffs and using these shadow manipulations in order to enable him to do that, and by applying those sort of debuffs to their opponent, and sort of like a fight your opponent well by bringing them down to your level and then beating them with experience. So by doing that, he has a way to integrate more in with the Viking melee philosophy and integrating more into groups, because you can put these debuffs and you can weaken other characters they're not just weak for you to 1v1 against them, but they're weak against the other characters that you're going to be coordinating yourself with. So this character, as opposed to some of the other stealth characters who really want to just sneak into the back line and sort of pick off targets by themselves, this character is able to assist better and actually be more an integral part of this sort of Viking heavy melee front line that is kind of the Viking philosophy as far as the way that their combat experience is created.
And that's very different, obviously from stealth in almost every other MMO, where stealthers, when they're a separate group or a separate class, not like ESO where everyone has stealth, we did want them and we needed them to be able to be played solo and also to fit in a group, right? And also not be always the last guy picked when there's nobody else and you need an 8-man and you only have 7 people, and you got to get that 8th person. So okay, we'll let the stealther come along. We couldn't find anyone decent. These folks were all supposed to be able to be integrated into a group or solo as well. And I think these guys do it, quite nicely.
Yeah, and even though they have to, in some of these different cases in different ways, have some integration in with being in the Veil, recharging a resource or having that initiation out of it, they're not very weak characters even when it comes to being out of the Veil, especially compared to other characters that don't have a strong melee basis anyway. Obviously, going up against heavy fighters, that's going to be a really hard proposition because heavy armor is good against physical attacks. Having a lot of physical attack bases is not very great against that. But that's just sort of the way the rock, paper, scissors things plays out. On the other hand, fighting against mages, fighting against support, fighting against healers, you're going to have a much better time because those characters just aren't very good in melee. And so even though you're not as strong as you would be coming right out of the Veil and doing a strong initiation on them, even if you just walk around right up to them and start going through your abilities, you're going to do better at that than some of these other characters are. So you can integrate in with a group. You can not have to necessarily, hold on, let me go back into stealth and come out and try to just pick somebody off and then go back into stealth again. You can kind of do that as your initiation, as your start, and then be involved in a long, drawn-out engagement and still be a rather effective character that's not just purely a one-trick pony of the only useful thing I do is I come out of stealth and I attack someone.
Exactly, and one of the other things, folks, to keep in mind is we've said from the beginning that all of our classes can wear all of our armor. And even though there's a disadvantage of wearing heavier armor as a stealther going into the Veil, in something like a siege, in something where you have already a lot of noise, it doesn't matter so much that you hear a stealther coming out because they're going to be around you anyway. So the stealthers won't be at that, oh my god, he's always in light armor, and if he doesn't get that strong opener, and if he doesn't, get the control spell off or the control ability off, he's dead because you're going to just, whoever he's fighting is just going to rip through the armor. In this case, you can make that decision to wear heavier armor, to be more protected. You can still go into the Veil, and you can still come out. Now, again, if you're wandering around, you won't want to do that. But when you go into certain, situations, if you go into big fur balls, if you go into sieges, it's not going to matter. You can wear the heavier armor, you pay the penalty for it, and you can still be really useful coming in and out of the Veil without worrying about just, when I come out, I may be able to go stabby on someone, but I won't last very long.
Yeah, and in that case, the Veil becomes, as we've said with the Arcane Charge or the way that the blood manipulation works, you're using it more as a way to gather your resources. It's sort of a way to reinvigorate yourself, get your resource build back up, and then come back out, not necessarily a way to sneak around in situations where you just can't really be sneaky in a very large battle, where there's all kinds of things that will detect you and can hear you and all of these things going on. So there's more to it than just, I'm going to be a lone wolf, sneak around and kill off characters. Although that's your playstyle and you're like, I just want to be a solo stealth character, these are the classes that will be able to do that.
Exactly. So I think we balanced out the two needs, that I wanted. Two of the needs I certainly wanted from these classes. One was to have the solo gameplay. I mean, having stealthers who can't solo kind of really goes against not only the mold, which at times we don't really care about, but goes against what I wanted. I know what a lot of our backers wanted. But at the same time, finding a way to integrate them into groups whether it's through the abilities or the use of the veil with still heavy armor, with the things that you can do to help a group with the debuffs of the Shadow Walker. We've got, I think, 3 really interesting stealth classes, and I'm really happy with them.
Yeah, I think we've started off in a fairly good place, keeping in mind that this is a class that's pretty far down the road for us as far as our class implementation schedule goes. As you've now seen all of the classes that we're doing in this first 10 trios, this one is further towards the end, and that's why it was a later stretch goal even, because this is not something that we want to put in with the very beginning, and it has to have a lot of the other rock, paper, scissors counters, and for to some extent it has to have some targets as well, which aren't even necessarily part of the first set of 3 trios. So it will be a while before these guys make their way into the game. There will be quite a bit of further development and refining of ideas and a lot of testing that goes into them. But once we get there, I think that these will be in a very strong place and will be very appealing to a lot of people, whether or not they really wanted to play as a solo stealth character.
I agree. All right, since it's 3:30, let's go to some Q&A. Keep in mind, we're going to be breaking this off at 5 minutes before 4, so I can talk a little bit about crafting.
Okay, Max will slow the chat, and you guys can start asking your questions. Whoa. Okay. Does the minimum threshold blood can drop to on the red cap still allow them enough blood to pay the cost of entering the Veil again?
Yeah, there are going to be multiple ways to go in and out of the Veil. Again, these are just sample abilities. There's not just going to be one go into Veil, go out of Veil mechanism for them. But the reason that the example was in there was so to show that if you manage to keep your blood up fairly high, then you can have a way to get in by paying a high cost that isn't necessarily a very long, slow, drawn-out process as would normally have to be the case. So this isn't exactly a vanish because you're paying a very high cost to do it. You're putting yourself in a situation where you're not going to be able to come out and do anything. And it's probably not going to be a very good escape because you're really hurting yourself in order to do this, and any residual effects, anything that has damage over time or anything that's left on your character that's going to cause you to die immediately after that is going to be fairly bad. So it's not a universal easy escape button, but it is a way to possibly get yourself out of a situation that you wouldn't necessarily be able to by doing the normal, slow, safe inter-stealth process.
Questions on asking more information on how to prevent stealth gank groups and how we're going to counter that.
Just some of the stuff that we've talked about in the past. We haven't really done anything new since then. Things like the armor requirement on stealthers. If you're walking around as in a gank group and you're all wearing heavy armor, or some of you are wearing heavy armor, everyone around you is going to know you're coming before they get anywhere near you. We talked about devices that the realm can place down, or players can place down as well. There'll be abilities that will certainly reveal stealthers. So it's not going to be, and again, we've said this right from the beginning with these guys, it can't be that whether we use the veil mechanic or something more traditional, just an individual invisibility. None of it is, I can walk wherever I want and nobody can ever see me. In terms of the gank groups, specifically, large gank groups, coming out of the veil, the idea is still that you're going to pay a penalty for that. So if you've got a whole bunch of guys in an area making noise, trying to come out at the same time, or around the same time in the same area, they're going to be paying a penalty as well. The idea, and I've been really clear about this even before the stretch goal, that one of the things that I was against, and I still am against, is the concept of a pure stealth-based gank group. And I think some of the mechanics we've already talked about before today, some of the things from today, and other things we're going to do, all are designed to make sure that that is a really less than optimal way to play the game.
Or at least when they are actually playing as a gank group. Because
Correct.
I think there's an important thing to make sure that players realize is that when you're having these large battles, there's going to be a lot of stealthers on both sides.
Exactly.
They're not penalized for that because that's a battle in which they're not trying to, 8v1 some guy.
Right.
If you're trying to do that, there will be a lot of penalties to it. But when you're engaged in an area that has a bunch of magic that's going on, that's already
The
messing
veil's
with
already
the veil,
pissed up.
it's not going to cause this feedback to your character. So there will be situations where you might have a stealth detachment that's part of a large-scale battle that all wants to perform some kind of operation, and that's fine. It's just that you're not individually picking on small numbers of players as a large group.
Out in the middle of nowhere.
Out in the middle of nowhere where there's nothing going on.
Do I get a bonus if I dye my armor black with the Shadow Walker, and do I get a penalty when I dye it a bright color?
We haven't discussed that, but actually, in all seriousness, that is something we might, consider doing.
Well, we have discussed it in the camouflage system, right?
Right, but not
And
for
so-
the walkers.
Not necessarily for this class, but because it does tie into concealment, because camouflage is basically a concealment buff.
That's true.
We haven't talked about how dyes will factor into that, but wearing certain things in certain environments will help you.
Cloaking Donkey is whining about his research into the empath and would like to know if Mark could elaborate on the idea of where the inspiration for the Shadow Walker and Veilstalker came from to save him time.
I see.
I honestly don't remember. For the Veil Stalker, the whole concept of Walker and Stalker, I came up with it so long ago. I don't even remember what started it way back before way back during the Kickstarter.
Well, do you remember where the basis of the veil came from?
No, I made it up.
Sorry, Cloaking Donkey.
Yeah, sorry. I wish I could point to something on the Veil. As far as on the Viking side with the Shadow Walker, well, shadows, that was a kind of easy win. And having a class that was a little bit removed from the typical Norse, cosmology, I was like, all right, maybe we can do something interesting. So yeah, sorry, CD. I wish I could point you to a source on this and go, yeah, that's where I got it from.
Questions on abilities designed to reveal stealthers and possible classes that might get them.
No. Well, let's stick with the current classes.
How long will a day-night cycle be?
It certainly won't be all day. That is something that we have talked about a number of times, and we're going to get that right over the course of beta. We have talked about all sorts of numbers here. It's really going to depend on how it works. And it also, by the way, doesn't have to scale or doesn't have to be a linear system. We could have it that during the hours, let's say we designate a server as an Eastern U.S. server. It could be that certain hours, the day-night cycle is faster than on other hours. So this is up in the air. It's actually something that we're not going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out now, because it is something we know we're going to have to just play our way through and see what works the best.
We have extra moons, we can have extra suns, and
Exactly.
then we can make the...
Yeah, and that's kind of the point. We can make it be whatever makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it never made sense in any of these games anyway. Oh look, there's the sun. Boy, it's moving really fast.
Erica and Samet, I'm not going to ask that question because every single time we do one of these reveals, Mark says it's 9-man groups, 8-man groups, 1-man group. I'm not going to ask it because he's just going to tease me then with your question. Okay, will the stealth classes be bound to the weapon type dagger, or is it possible to use other weapons effectively as well?
It's possible to use other weapons. Each realm sort of has an affinity towards certain types of weapons in general. Stealth classes, we sort of give them daggers out of a courtesy to them because that's what assassins typically are associated with and what most stealth characters in most games are generally associated with. But they will have other weapons, and they will be different by the different classes, so that they're not all sort of going in the same direction, and do have some options for different damage types because that's important even within just the physical realm.
Since the Redcaps lose blood while not in the Veil, will they always have to be stealthed when outside of combat?
Can you do that one again?
Since the Redcaps lose blood while not in the Veil, will they always have to be stealthed when outside of combat?
They won't always have to be, but if you're coming out of the Veil, you start out basically at full on this resource that kind of decays over time. If you start out outside of the Veil, you'll be starting out sort of at a minimum level. That's not to say that you're at a level where if you lose a little bit of blood from there, you die. It's not, very low. But you'll be at a state where you're sort of starting at the lowest end that you could be. So you'll start off at the weakest. But because your abilities are able to generate blood back to you, that would be a way for you to start out outside of the Veil and then build it back up. It's sort of the, not quite the same, but similar to the way that Arcane Charge works. If you've expended all of your charge as a Veil Stalker, you're not going to have any. But if you go into the Veil, you'll get all of yours back, and then you can choose how to spend it. Because you have none and you're just fighting normally, you're just at a sort of minimal level for your character, which is not necessarily so low that you're not able to be good, but it's sort of the lowest that you can be, and then if you go back into the Veil to charge yourself back up, you'll be better. The minimum level is still good enough that you can run around and fight people effectively without having these bonuses and without having these extra resources. It's not that big of a night and day sort of difference in the same way as we just talked about with the day-night cycle. It's an important difference that you are going to want to optimize to make sure that you maximize your performance, but it's not something that you're going to have a huge deficit from if you're going from the low end versus the top end of your resource spectrum.
Exactly. I mean, keep in mind that what we don't want to do, obviously, is force you, for any of these classes, to only play at night or only play within the Veil. You're not going to die if you're just, hey, I'm just standing around in town for a couple hours chatting with people. That would be ridiculous. We're not going down that path at all. That would be really foolish. But no matter what, stealthers are supposed to use their abilities to the max, and that means making sure that you spend some time in the Veil to power up before you go do that, whether it's stabby or blood draining thing that you love to do.
Can characters in the Veil see each other?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit more about the Veil specifically? How long can you stay in there? Are there other dangers of being there? Can you go into them? Can you go into the Veil in combat?
Yes, you can go into the Veil in combat. Ben talked about going into it quickly, or more quickly, with some of the classes will have, whether it's this trio or potentially others that may use the Veil. Normally, getting into the Veil is not very quick. It is not meant to be something that, I can walk around and spot somebody right there, but just push a button and get in. We actually had some concept art during the Kickstarter, which showed that kind of vortex and the Veil opening. So you're going to have a little bit. You're going to have to make a little bit of an effort to get in. In terms of how long you can stay in, that's a to be determined. It's not going to be a 30-second stealth and you're out. We said that was something that we wanted to do right. We wanted to give people plenty of time to walk around within the Veil, but it won't be forever. It certainly will not be forever, and you pay a penalty the longer you're in there. Now, what is that? Is it 30 seconds? No, again, because that would be just equally stupid.
Well, it's not necessarily equally stupid. There might be classes in the future that can briefly duck into the Veil and come back out.
No,
that's not these
point.
Classes, though.
No, not these guys. It would be the same thing if we said, well, you only had 30 seconds in the Veil, or you can stay in the Veil for as much as you want, but after 30 seconds, you go down to 0 blood. Yeah, that would be bad. In terms of what you'll be doing inside the Veil, will there be dangers within the Veil? Originally, we talked about some PvE stuff there. We're not talking about that right now. We don't know we still don't know if that's the right mechanic. I don't think it is, based on what or how these classes are coming along. We may not need it. But you will possibly have to fight other players in the Veil. So, the whole Walker-Stalker concept has not gone away. Once again, this is the first, trio like this, and this is only the first pass of their abilities.
Well, we see the Shadow Walkers trolling people with copies of themselves.
That is a very trolly ability, actually. Because you don't know, because it's going to be an illusionary character that pops out and attacks you. And you don't know if that's another real character popping out and attacking you, or if it's just that illusion that keeps doing it over and over again. So you might be lulled into a false sense of security, and one of those times, it's an actual real character, and then they get a bonus for attacking you because you have that effect on you. So it is kind of a way for them to troll someone, but it's on a death curse. So it's fine to do something silly like that once in a while.
Exactly. Remembering, of course, that death curses are not abilities. They're not something that, is going to regen very quickly. They're going to have long cooldowns. It's not going to be something like, oh yeah, I can do this all day. No, you won't be able to.
Will stealthers be in at release?
We would really like that.
We really want them to be. That's certainly what we're hoping for. It's not what we're promising. We're promising just what we promised during the stretch goal. Let's see how everything goes. The important thing for us, it's important for us to try to get them in for a release, but we made, and especially I made a promise, that we weren't going to create a stealth system we weren't going to implement a stealth system unless it was great, and if we had to yank it out, I would pay out of my own pocket refunds to anybody who backed during the stealth period. I'd rather not have to do that, so we're going to make sure, doubly make sure, that this is a great system. And if it takes a little longer, it's going to take a little longer. Now, we don't want it to. We do think that the way we're going with the class trios now, with the way we have tightened them up, is going to buy us more time to get in these and potentially other trios as well that weren't planned for release. But no promises. This is what we're going to try to do, and it's so crucially important to get these folks right. That's just the bottom line.
Rhaegar is asking about the Veil Stalker.
Okay.
He's asking why we pulled away from the hard counter of a Veil Stalker.
Well, it's it gets into a very long story of we had the path system, and then we're going to have multiple paths, and then we're going to break those off into different classes, and did we want to have a specific very hard counter thing here and there? It's something that's not off the table entirely. Mm-hmm. It's, as we've said, these are not an exhaustive list of all classes that will ever be in the game. These are just as many as we want to sort of lay out at the moment, and it takes us probably already past the launch of the game, even though we would like to get all these in before. Probably it will take us already past then, so we don't want to continue to, do this level of development that we've done on these classes to a bunch of other ones, which would be even more speculative. So there might be further classes that are specifically targeted at being anti-stealth, but for the most part, in this set of trios that we've already announced, there are enough counterplay opportunities that stealthers will have difficulties. There will be, as we've talked about, ways to craft things that will be anti-stealth. There will be certain characters like scouts who are good at seeing things, especially finding stealthers because of the way that stealth and vision works. That stealth will already have a hard enough time that we don't feel that we necessarily need to put in an exacting hard counter in order to get this character in the game.
How do you envision the solo playstyle working out for these guys, considering the large map and lack of escape options when encountering large groups?
Well, easily, actually. I mean, if we have a stealth like we've talked about, or a stealth mechanic like we've talked about, where you're going to be in the Veil for a long period of time, the chance of accidentally running into, a large group on a large map without you being able to get away probably means you weren't paying enough attention in certain situations. The idea is if we can use the Veil, or if we end up using the Veil the way I hope we will, where you can have a longer duration stealth, that when you're wandering around in an area where you're going through, forests, you're going through mountains where you can't really see things that far away, you probably want to be in stealth. You really don't want to be just wandering around picking daisies, looking at how pretty the world is. So I think from that perspective, some smart play by stealthers is really going to work to their advantage. In terms of escape mechanisms, again, keep in mind that the whole game is kind of different from other games. So the idea of you just rounding or like some games we won't mention, where you just walk and then maybe 100 yards later 100 yards down the road, you actually see the guy who's been there. You've seen the view distances in this game. Sneaking up on somebody in an open field, sneaking up on somebody in the grasslands, sneaking up on, or a large group sneaking up on you in those sorts of settings, not going to be like other games. You're going to have plenty of notice, and it's about situational awareness. I mean, if you're walking through these areas, yeah, maybe you should actually be looking, And besides that, even with all that said and done, there are ways that you'll be able to, like all classes who go out solo, you have to be able to move. You have to be able to get away from things. It's not going to be, because stealthers, just like mages, aren't one-hit kills, it's not going to be like, oh, look, we see him over there, he's dead before he can even do anything. That's just not how this game operates. So, no, I think stealthers are going to have a very good time and a very fun time soloing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that, too, if you really want to play as a dedicated solo character, is picking your, not only encounters, but your area of operation. If you're going to be running around in an area where there's a lot of big battles happening, you're going to run into a lot of big groups. So even if you're careful and avoid them, you're going to be constantly avoiding these groups, and it's going to be hard to find these fights. And if you find somebody by themselves, it's likely that they're going to call for help while you're engaging them, and their friends are going to come and add on to that fight. But if you're somewhere, further behind the front lines, where there are crafters going out there to find things, where there might be more solo characters running around and, either just going from point A to point B, or escorting some caravan, or just moving to get themselves to the fight for that day, you might be picking off more characters more readily than if you had just stayed at the front lines where all the big groups are fighting. So it'll be a little bit of some gameplay decisions there, but yeah, as far as just being able to not get caught up in things, it will be probably the easiest as one of these classes out of all of the trios to avoid getting involved in fights that you don't want to be involved in.
Exactly, because any character moving solo around the map has got the same issues, right?
Yeah.
If you're a mage, if you're a fighter, walking around the world and not being able to, and not paying attention to what's going on is not good. And you know that if you're a solo character and you're going towards a battle, you've got to be more careful. At least these guys do have the ability to use the veil, so that if for whatever reason you weren't paying enough attention, or you are walking through a forest, or you're walking through an area where your view distance is clipped to something really tight, you still have the advantage that none of the other classes, or at least most of the other classes, won't have.
Okay. Do you still take damage for staying in the veil too long?
That is something that is absolutely still on the table. We'll have to see how it goes when it balances out with all the abilities and the play style. If we find we don't need it, fantastic. We don't need it. If we find that is something that is needed to help balance out the abilities we're giving these guys, then it's going to go in. It's not. None of this is about punishing the stealthers. It's about leveling the playing field like we do for all classes. Everyone has their own banes and boons. Every class has advantages and disadvantages, and the stealthers have an awful lot of advantages in this game without some of the more traditional disadvantages like lighter armor or shorter duration stealth that other games have had. So it's just a matter of balancing it all out.
Okay, we're almost to the point where we need to start talking about crafting. So, question here, can you force someone out of stealth, and how?
I think we've already got some abilities that do that, actually.
I thought we did too.
So I think if you look in the Shadow Walker, there's an ability here that draws enemies who are in the Veil back into the natural world with you. So if you're in the Veil and you're walking around and you see some other character, you could engage them in the Veil because you're both in it and you can both see each other, or you could use this ability that sucks you both back into the real world where maybe you have some friends who can help you, or there are other things going on where you want them to be outside of the Veil to, maybe start draining some of their resources because they're another stealth class from one of these other realms who prefers to be in the Veil to keep their either blood topped off or their arcane charge maxed out. So being in the real world for them is important. I think the Wisp might have one of these in their examples. If they don't have it in the examples, they have one in the list of things that are not on the reveal list. So there are ways for these characters to suck things out of the veil back into the real world. And that's another thing that we can build into some crafted consumable abilities, so that even if you're not a character that naturally has this capability, if you carry around some widgets and gadgets around with you, you'll be able to do some of these things to a lesser extent in order to deal with situations.
Okay, so, it's time actually to wrap this up. So we'll start with the first thing, which we almost always do, though I forgot it one time, is to ask you folks, what do you think? Thumbs up, thumbs down. How do we do with the first pass at these kind of stealthers?
Okay, what do you think? Max, you can release the chat. Release the house.
Okay, Ben, I'm going to ask you to step off the couch.
Okay.
Up, amazing. Yay. We have an easy mode.
No.
There's one down. Everybody seems to be saying up.
Awesome. So, again, keep in mind, folks, this is our first pass on stealthers. We're going to have plenty of these kind of stealthers. We're going to have plenty of time to balance these guys and to look at whether we add more of the walker stalker, abilities to them. This is just the first pass. We think, I'm really confident about these guys, actually.
Yeah, I think they actually came out a lot easier than I thought that they would, based on how complicated the background of stealth has been and the conversations that we've gone through dealing with the path
Have we had
system.
conversations about this? And path?
There might have been some meetings about this, but I think with the way that the combat system is shaping up and the way that the abilities are going to work and the way that the ability construction and the ability builder and having the different mechanics of the different archetypes, I don't think that this will be as much of a difficulty as you might expect, because there will be so many already pre-existing challenges that they have to overcome that they just don't have in other games.
Exactly. So we're going to move on to crafting, but before I do that, I need to do two things. The first thing to do is I want to thank Ben. Ben has done an absolutely awesome job of working on these classes with me. His input, his patience, his ability to deal with all the issues that, not only I throw out, other people throw out, has been absolutely fantastic. I am so proud of what he has done since we started on classes. And the same holds true for Michelle and Sandra, whose work on the concept art has been outstanding. You've seen it. It's fabulous. These guys are great. They've been great from the first time they started working here until now. But everyone else also who's worked on the classes here at City State has also contributed, hugely. And some guys like James don't get enough credit,
Yep.
For the work he's done as well. And again, it's not just these guys. It's also, whether it's Tyler or dealing with us as as the producer, as well as an artist, or Cross, who's going to be doing all the effects for these classes, or John Young, who's obviously doing such a fantastic job on making our models look better, or Scott, who's pulling out his hair, trying to make a great animation system, or the programming team led by Andrew, who has to make sure that obviously we don't do too crazy things, but on the other hand, also has to say, and find a way to make some things happen that we consider really important. So, it's all of that, that has fed into these classes. And Genesee, who's been now, learning how to be, Twitch, head of twitching for us.
All right.
and Max, who's put up with, editing and re-editing and constantly re-editing and editing again, sometimes the same document tons of times, to make this all happen. So, it's been a great bunch of reveals. Obviously, some you folks love, some you didn't love so much, and that's great. That's exactly what we expected. If you guys didn't have those sorts of reactions, we were probably doing something wrong. We always said, right from the beginning, even before Ben got here, that we were going to piss people off. I knew that from the beginning. I embrace it. I'm not scared of it. We're trying to create something really great, something different, not something for everybody. You can see that in the gameplay that we put forward. You can see it in the lore. You can see it in everything we're doing, the crazy stuff we're doing with building and just trying to make a game that's not, or trying to make an MMO that's not like any other MMO, but still pulls in some great elements from other games, as well as some great elements that we're adding to it. So thank you all for what you've seen, thank you for what you've said to us based on what you've seen, and I guarantee you, absolutely guarantee, it's only going to get better from here. So Ben, thanks very much.
Thank you.
It's been great. Now I'm going to,
There's love.
So now I'm going to talk to you guys alone for a couple minutes. And the reason why I'm asking Ben to leave is going to be very obvious in about 2 minutes. Probably less. So, crafting. We've been talking about crafting for a long time. We talked about it before the Kickstarter. Talked about it during the Kickstarter. Talked about it after the Kickstarter. Talked about it in the BSC days. Then we started talking about it as well at the end of last year and then the beginning of this year. And then we kind of went a little bit radio silent on it. And the reason we went radio silent on it is involved with a bunch of things. Easiest way to start it off is first with an apology, which is why I didn't want Ben sitting here, because this is my apology. This is something that is absolutely on me. It's a mea culpa. Last year, I asked the folks from Massively and MMORPG to join us in our forums in a special section where we were going to just talk about crafting. And so Bree and Jeff and Bill, were given access. They came in. I put up the last vision document for crafting. And we started to talk about it. Not much, because, I put it up and we were about to talk. And then, of course, Janet got sick. And when that happened, honestly, I cut out a couple of things. One of the things I did cut out was my free time on the weekends and sometimes at night being in the forums. And I did cut back on that, and you guys saw it. So, that's why we hadn't talked about crafting in a long time. I wanted to get them on board. I wanted them to see everything we were doing. I wanted them to be involved as well with the community. And I dropped the ball. And so I'm going to start this off with a huge apology, first to Massively, to Mop, to Bree, and to Jeff. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for wanting to be a part of it. I am absolutely sorry that I dropped the ball. There is no excuse. There are reasons, but still should have happened, so I apologize. Bill Murphy, MMORPG, same thing. You guys have been great. Both of your, obviously, sites have been great to us, and this is my apology to you as well. I wish, obviously, who wouldn't wish that, their wife doesn't get sick? But that's the apology. I am so sorry, and I'll say something that I almost never say. I say it less than I promise, is I owe you guys one. So, Mop, MMORPG, you got a favor for me coming, all you got to do is ask. I am really, really sorry. That's the apology, and that's, I hope you join us again for something else. So, that's that on that part of crafting. The good news on crafting, it's not like nothing was going on. I just wasn't talking about it. I wasn't paying a lot of attention there. There's a new document full of lots more stuff. It's kind of longer than the last one that we're going to talk about in 2 weeks. And when I say talk about in 2 weeks, we're going to have an hour, maybe it'll go into 2 hours. Whatever it will be, we're going to have a very long Q&A with you folks about crafting. I'm going to do a reveal, and we're going to tell you everything you want to know. Well, let me take that back. Everything that I can tell you right now about the crafting system. Because saying what you guys want to know, I'll never leave this chair. They'll find me like some mummy, from Egypt, which is kind of fitting with the pyramids in our game right now. But it's going to be a very long talk, and I will talk about a ton of stuff. I think that the crafters who've been waiting for a very long time to get this information, especially those who haven't gone to our forums, to the alpha section, hint, 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 you might want to go and get a preview of the doc, but there will be a new document, which I'll also put up on our forums once we get past the reveal. It will be available there. All you'll have to do is go and see it, plus the reveal, of course, in 2 weeks. So that's it. We're going to have a lot to talk about then, I think, and I'm willing to obviously put my reputation on the line again, like I have with a few times during these reveals and other things. I think the crafters who have been waiting for a system which rewards the pure crafter, who rewards the people who want to spend the time, make the effort to have a crafting system that makes them special, where they can make special items as well, where they can be, needed in a player run, and not even a player driven, but a player run economy. I think you folks are going to be really happy with what we're proposing. So that's it. Again, to Bree and to Jeff over at MOP, and to Bill and company and Garrett and company over at MMORPG, mea culpa, I am sorry. 2 weeks, folks will see the crafting system. So that's it. I'm going to have an update probably a little bit late tonight, but there will be an update today. I don't think there'll be an FNF, so please don't count on it. Hopefully there'll be an alpha test, but I'll know more I'll know more by the time of the update. No matter what, certainly there will be IT testing going on for the rest of the day today. And that's it. Have a great rest of your evening in Europe, and great rest of your day almost everywhere else. So that's it. Time to say goodnight, Gracie. Or in this case, goodnight, Genesee. And that's it for now on the class reveals for Camelot Unchained. And as always, folks, thanks for your support.